What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the new iPhone 16 Pro. What's old is new again. A gold iPhone is back in the lineup. Just don't call it gold. And don't call the new camera control feature a button either. Apple seems particularly sensitive about that stuff this year. And we'll talk about that and everything else you need to know with this new phone, of course. But first things first, let's see what comes inside the box. So yanking off those familiar stickers and sliding off the lid, the first thing you're presented with is the phone itself. This is the new Desert Titanium color, and it is very similar to various shades of gold we've seen on plenty of Apple products over the years. Also inside the box, you'll find a USB-C cable for charging. And on the one hand, this is probably the nicest cable included with literally any smartphone nowadays. It's a thick, braided nylon, it's tough, it's long, it's the kind of accessory you'd expect to get after spending $1,000, but it's the only accessory included here. The only other thing inside the box this year is a smaller stack of paperwork. One sheet reminds you again that you don't have a physical SIM card tray anymore, and the other is a fold-out packet of instructions and legal info. Missing for the first time ever is a couple of those iconic Apple stickers. Sad to see Apple abandon that tradition, but rumor has it you can actually ask an employee at the store for some stickers when you buy the phone. So here it is once again. This is the new iPhone 16 Pro. And as we power it on and start swiping through the setup pages, one new thing you'll come across is a reference to that "don't call it a button" camera control button. This is a new physical button on the side of all the new iPhone 16s this year, and you get kind of a preview of how it works when you go through the setup process. It honestly is something you really have to practice with and play around with, though, in order to figure it out, but I'll talk more about that in just a second. Now, as far as pricing and color options, the regular 16 Pro and the larger 16 Pro Max are the same $999 and $1199 they've been. You can pick 128, 256, 512 gigs, or 1 terabyte of storage. And the titanium themed color options this year include black titanium, which I showcased for my 16 Pro Max unboxing, white titanium, natural titanium, and of course this new desert titanium. So I know it's not that obvious, but the new iPhone 16 Pro is actually a little different this year physically, and it's different in that really inconvenient way where you have to buy a new case for it for sure, and perhaps even some other accessories too. It's now a 6.3 inch device. That's the screen size corner to corner, up from 6.1 inches, which was the size we saw on, well, every Pro iPhone before it. The increase in screen size is due to two things. One, the whole phone itself is a few millimeters taller and a few millimeters wider. It's subtle, but side by side with last year's 15 Pro here, I think you can sort of see it. So like I said, you won't be popping on your old case or using a leftover screen protector for this new phone, unfortunately. The dimensions are just totally different. The other thing that's changed, Apple says this new phone has the slimmest bezels ever on an iPhone. The bezel is that thin black border that frames the display. And again, side by side with the 15 Pro, I guess the 16 Pro's slim black edge is slightly slimmer, but in my opinion, this is just not something most people will notice. And in the hand, honestly, the size difference isn't much of a factor either. It's not like you get a ton of extra usable screen real estate, and aside from the 16 Pro being a bit heavier, feels pretty familiar, no matter how I stretch my thumb. All in all, I think the change in size doesn't really change the look and feel of this phone too much. Around back, the titanium and glass build is pretty much the same as last year. This desert titanium is kind of a mix between regular yellow gold and a pinkish rose gold. It's a soft, subtle shade, but I think it looks pretty nice. And the titanium frame and polished details certainly round out the premium build and high-end design language that Apple is known for. This phone is also tough-ish. It's IP68 water and dust resistant, same as the last few years, but all in all, a very familiar fit and finish. Taking a look around, most everything on the phone itself is the same as previous iPhones too. There's the volume button on the left side, below the action button that debuted last year. Nothing at the top of the phone. At the bottom, the same old USB-C port flanked by speakers and microphone cutouts. On the right side, however, the power button now has some company. Towards the bottom, way below that power button, is a new recessed physical feature called camera control. It is an actual button. even though Apple refuses to call it a button for whatever reason, and it has additional pressure and touch sensitivity commands too. Camera control is a recessed button, so kind of a dimple or divot compared to the outward power button. And I think this helps combat any accidental presses when you grip the phone a certain way. Now, the camera control obviously is associated mainly with the camera app itself and a few camera adjacent tools. You currently can't customize this feature or button much beyond setting it to a single or double click and changing out which camera function it launches. By default, one push of camera control, just like pressing a button, will launch the camera app itself from the lock screen, from the home screen, and from any other app you're currently in. And like I said, you can change that action to a double press to make it harder to trigger accidentally, and you can also have camera control launch the QR code scanner, the magnifier, or do nothing at all. But you can't currently customize camera control anymore beyond those couple of options. Now, when you're inside the camera app, clicking camera control again will snap a picture. I mean, let's be honest, it's literally a physical camera shutter button in that regard, but it also is pressure sensitive and I guess has swipe controls. It's the most appropriate description. So if you just sort of lightly press on camera control or squeeze it, but don't actually click it like a button, you'll be presented with a slider of whatever your last camera setting option was. And if you run your finger across camera control, almost like a dial, you'll slide or swipe through whatever setting you're working with. And to switch between the different camera settings and options that are associated with camera control, well, you double squeeze it. But don't click it down all the way, just a generous double squeeze, and then you can swipe through all the settings and functions of the camera that camera control utilizes. In playing around with this for a little while, it really takes some getting used to. The placement of camera control itself on the side of the phone is different, it's new, and it takes some finagling to figure out how you can quickly click it, depending on how you grip your phone. When you're squeezing and swiping or sliding through the camera options, the most useful use case of camera control function that I've seen so far is zoom. Sliding the zoom in and out with camera control feels very natural, and it's a little better than pinching to zoom on the phone itself. And having easy access to the depth of field, exposure, focal lengths, and new photographic styles and tones is nice, but I don't know how many people mess with those settings often enough to justify a whole entire new physical feature on the phone itself. This is a really interesting addition to the entire iPhone lineup this year, and I'm curious to see how much use it actually gets. A couple features associated with the camera control, like the new visual intelligence tool, aren't even on the phone yet. More on that in a moment. So there will be some stuff to come with camera control, but in the meantime, this is definitely going to take some getting used to. Speaking of stuff that's still to come on the new iPhones, Apple Intelligence, their myriad of AI features they've been demoing and talking about pretty much nonstop since earlier this summer at WWDC, and sort of the theme for the iPhone 16s this year, well, that wasn't ready in time for the launch. Apple Intelligence is coming later this year via a myriad of different software updates. There seems to be a roadmap of sorts where different chunks of Apple Intelligence stuff will be released in different updates month after month. And this honestly has been pretty disappointing. I mean, the signs at the Apple Store all reference Apple Intelligence, even though it's not on these new iPhones yet. I feel like as an Apple employee, this would be a tough thing to explain to a potential customer. And there's a saying that goes something like, don't buy something today for the promise of what's to come tomorrow. Because of this Apple Intelligence situation, I think the iPhone 16s this year feel not so new. Perhaps a month or two from now, we'll have everything AI, and it'll be like buying these phones on day one yet again. But in the meantime, the lack of, well, everything software-wise that Apple spent the bulk of their iPhone announcement talking about feels like a detrimental thing for the launch of this phone. On the bright side, Apple's latest iOS update, iOS 18, does bring a bunch of new software updates and changes that attempt to make the phone feel newer. The bulk of iOS 18 that I think people will care about has to do with all the new customization features, like the ability to set your app icons to a specific color and change up Control Center. I have a dedicated video all about that if you want to learn more and customize the phone yourself. There's also changes to a number of Apple's apps like Photos. There's new ways to message, improvements to Mail, Safari. There's a new Passwords app for security. So fresh out of the box, if you haven't yet updated to iOS 18 on your current iPhone, this new one has some new stuff to make it feel, well, new. But iOS 18 is actually available on most iPhones, even the older ones. So plenty of these features you might have already had. Apple Intelligence, however, well, it's actually reserved for only the iPhone 15 Pros and then these new iPhone 16s. So just keep that in mind if AI or Apple Intelligence is something you're seriously interested in. You're going to have one of the newer phones anyway. When Apple Intelligence finally comes to fruition, all the new features and capabilities will be powered by the new, faster processor and upgraded internals inside these phones. This year's 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max get Apple's latest, most powerful A18 Pro Chip and 8 gigabytes of RAM. This is, of course, the fastest, most capable, the bestest iPhone to ever iPhone. We know that. I'm not sure you'll see that big of a performance boost over last year just during your average daily use. But there's some great new gaming titles that'll play well on this super powerful iPhone if you're into that, and all the extra power is going to be critical for Apple Intelligence whenever it finally arrives. Regardless, it is nice to see that Apple is still pushing the boundaries with performance, and the new iPhone 16 Pros seem to be the fastest phones overall, with performance scores that rival even the processors on some of their Macs. One thing that Apple briefly mentioned in their keynote, without much context, was that the new iPhone 16s had the best battery life ever. They didn't put any numbers to that claim initially, and on Apple's website, the new iPhone 16s and 16 Pros have like an hour or two of extra life in certain circumstances based on Apple's advertised measurements. This 16 Pro in particular, though, has less of an advertised increase over previous iPhones compared to like the larger Pro Max this year. So I suppose if battery life is your number one concern, get the Pro Max, since that does seem like it's got some extra oomph. As far as charging speeds, the 16 Pros can now charge from 0 to 50% in 30 minutes over USB-C, and also supports faster 25-watt wireless MagSafe speeds and 15-watt G2 wireless charging speeds. So if you do find yourself burning through your battery before the day's end, you'll at least be juicing up a bit quicker across the board. Now, it feels odd to not have much else to say about the display, but this year's iPhone 16 Pro doesn't really have any different or better of a viewing experience compared to last year. The slightly larger screen is the same LTPO Super Retina XDR OLED panel as last year, with the same resolution, the same 120Hz refresh rate, and the same 2000 nits or so of max brightness. The only thing Apple mentioned that was different for whatever reason was that the screen can actually get down to just 1 nit of brightness, which is cool, I guess, if you're in a pitch black room and need to dim down the display as low as possible to not blind yourself. But that truly was the only change or upgrade they seemed to mention over last year. It's not the end of the world though. The display on the Pro iPhones has always been great. I think this is a stellar viewing experience overall. And really, the screen upgrades should have actually just come to the regular iPhone 16s, but they didn't. Those phones still rock 60 hertz panels, if you can believe that. Also, I don't know that Apple has done anything with the speakers on these iPhones in quite some time. You've got what seems to be the same dual speaker stereo setup with the one big speaker at the bottom alongside some microphone holes and the secondary speaker in the earpiece. I think this phone sounds the same as last year's phone, which sounded the same as the previous year's iPhone and so on. But here's a sound sample so you can determine that for yourself. Finally, if it wasn't already obvious with the new camera control feature, this year's iPhones are once again focused on camera upgrades, and the Pro is no exception. Hardware-wise, while the surface level specs don't seem that different, Apple did make some changes to the 48 megapixel main lens, 12 megapixel periscope telephoto lens, and upgraded the ultra-wide lens completely to a 48 megapixel shooter as well. The selfie camera doesn't seem like it changed in any way, and inside the camera app, while most of what you see will be familiar to you, there's a couple things to highlight. For one, the camera setup on this 16 Pro is the exact same as the 16 Pro Max. There's no difference in hardware, no difference in features, no difference in capabilities. So if you ever bought the Pro Max specifically for the cameras, you won't have to do that this year. The regular 16 Pro is exactly the same. Apple also talked a lot about photographic styles, a way in which you can quickly customize your pictures before or after you take the shot to give them a different look. It's not exactly a filter per se, but it sort of kind of is. You can set your photos to a cool tone, vibrant, natural, give them a certain color tint. It's interesting, albeit probably not something everyone will use all the time, but I suppose if you're trying to get a certain look with your pictures, or if you're not happy with the default pictures, if Apple happened to change anything over last year, this is a way for you to get a better default look. Apple also added 4K 120 FPS slow-mo, which they demoed in their keynote as well, and thanks to the more powerful processor and improvements to the camera software and image processing, the iPhone this year will of course look better, or at least different, with how it captures images and videos. I'll have plenty of camera comparison tests coming soon. The initial reviews, though, honestly are a bit mixed, but Apple of course says this is the best camera ever on an iPhone, and I think if you lean towards the Pro side of things, there's probably a lot of great new stuff to take advantage of. So what all is new with the new iPhone 16 Pro? Well, it's bigger, even if it doesn't really yield you much other than a bigger bill at the Apple Store for a new case and screen protector you need to buy for it. It's faster and more powerful and totally ready to take on Apple Intelligence if and when those features make it to this phone sometime in the hopefully not so distant future. The cameras are better, like they always try to be year after year. The battery life is supposedly better. You can charge the phone faster. And there's the whole camera control deal, which TBD on if that catches on or if I ever end up using it. Honestly, there's a lot that's new with the new iPhone 16s this year, and a lot more still to come with future software updates. Is this enough to get you to upgrade this year? Well, you tell me. Let me know what you think of the new iPhone 16s in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.